Okay, can I start? Yes?
Yes.
Excellent. So let me stop for a moment. So first of all, I wanted to thank you for this invitation and for the protest and the actions that you're doing to go fight against the censorship in academia. As I see it, is a very dangerous times. The advance of Zionism and the ideologies that are against the free thinking and the criticism of Israel and genocide and the denunciation of apartheid and segregation it's very troubling in Germany. So I thank you for your courage. You are in the front lines as I see the resolutions that are being passed and how the universities are responding. You need to be careful because there's much they can do, but there's also much we can do in a way collectively. So I thank you again for this invitation. And I prepared, so I was going to talk about war and corruption and the destruction of nature. I'm going to do it a little bit at the end, but first I wanted to take the opportunity to do a sit in terms of a teaching moment in terms of the anti-Semitism resolutions that have been passed. So we're all in the same page of what happened with this cancellation, what has been passed in terms of regulation, and what can be done. Okay, so this is what I prepared. So. Okay, so I have, as I said, I have prepared a few slides on anti-Semitism and what these new resolutions are calling the hostility towards Israel and the equation of these two concepts. So first, there is a definition going around for years already from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IHRA, which is basically has put forward a Zionist definition of anti-Semitism, which has been criticized by the most experts on genocide and on the Holocaust. So this definition, basically the definition is there, I put it explicitly, is basically understand Semitism as a perception, as a certain perception of Jews. And this is very troublesome because basically perception depends on, a subjective understanding of what is anti-Semitism. So it could be anything in a way. It's a perception of people that feel threatened for some reason. And of course, I am a firm defender of all human rights and against discrimination of all ethnicities. However, the idea that we are going to feel attacked and therefore we can have legal recourse against others, this is very troublesome because it's too ambiguous. Okay, so this definition basically says that this rhetoric and physical manifestations, but rhetoric, so language, words, statements that are perceived as being against Jews or in a way kind of defaming people from that ethnicity could be construed as anti-Semitism. And this perception and this kind of rhetorical manifestations can be directed not only to Jewish people, but also to non-Jewish people and their property. And this is, if we think about the stretching of this definition, we can think about a millionaire or a billionaire that it happens to be Jewish. That basically we can think about a wealth tax that is going to be imposed on the billionaire class, and it could be construed as a form of anti-Semitism, because if you're going to go against as a kind of a direct action against the property of a Jewish citizens, basically, that could be construed as anti-Semitism and put a limit to state action that is legitimate. So this definition has been criticized by its ambiguity. However, that definition is not the most problematic part of this push by the IHRA to impose this definition of anti-Semitism, because what happens is that in the definition, it is contemplated a series of examples of what constitutes anti-Semitism. And here is where the criticism of Israel is at the center, basically. Two of these examples are, first, denying the Jewish people the right to self-determination. And of course, we can all agree that all peoples all around the world have the right to self-determination, which is not the same as a state having the right to exist. And we can talk about that. People have rights. States have recognition of other states. They don't have really rights. Only individuals, and now corporations have rights, but this is a perversion of law, if you will. And the problem is that this right to self-determination is equated with the criticism of Israel as a racist endeavor. And here it is the idea of racism, very broad, again, not described specifically, and saying that basically Israel is an apartheid state, or a state that practices segregationism, is therefore considered as a form of anti-Semitism under this definition. This is extremely problematic, since the UN has recognized, and many of the human rights organizations around the world have recognized, that Israel has two different codes of law and regulations, one for Israeli Jews and the other for the rest of the population, and the majority of them Arabs, right, that basically are segregated. And you, in order to go to work, for example, you would have to pass several checkpoints in order to, and show your papers in a way, and be harassed by the police in order to go about your daily life. And this is the same as South Africa had during apartheid, and also the United States during the Jim Crow era, which was basically the era after the Civil War, in which slavery was abolished. But the southern states wanted to still preserve the division between the former slaves and the white population by introducing a set of legislation, codes really, to legally segregate people, right? So these are considered as a forms of apartheid. There are many other places which have practices, but these are the most prominent. And Israel is part of this definition. In a way, it is just a fact that they have these codes, and therefore it is legitimate to call it an apartheid state. Then the other problematic example is to draw comparisons between the contemporary Israeli policy and the Nazis, or the totalitarian regime during Nazi Germany. And of course, when we think about how Israel has been bombing hospitals and tents and burning people alive, we need to, there's the comparison with what happened to Jews during the Holocaust is inevitable. In a way, many people do it. It's normal in a sense that if we are talking, we think about the word, for example, fascism or Nazism, is something that is used to qualify other racist endeavors and other states and other leaders, basically, that practice this kind of hatred and dehumanization of certain populations. So therefore, why we cannot do it against the state of Israel, since the states are all, as Jacques Rancière, the philosopher, would say, all oligarchic states. They're all machineries in a way. Cannot be equated with the people. And here the problem is that this definition basically fuses and equates Zionism with and the support of the state of Israel and the supremacy of the Jewish ethnicity with the Jewish people. And this is, of course, a mistake, and it should never be done in a way, and it's extremely anti-Semitic to do it. So therefore, this definition is in itself anti-Semitic, because it equates the anti-Semitism with the criticism of Israel. Then the Bundestag happened to have passed a few resolutions since 2017 against BDS, but the most recent one that I'm going to talk about it here is the resolution that was passed on November 7th, that was basically approved or negotiated on November 6th, and was passed officially on November 7th. This was the same day that the university uploaded the statement justifying the cancellation of the lecture, and they basically quote these ideas of based on the preventive measures against anti-Semitism. So this is crucially important. And we need to understand that this resolution is not a fringe resolution. It is a resolution that was passed from the far right to the Green Party. And the majority of the consensus, basically, the great majority of representatives in the Bundestag are in favor of this definition. And this definition was crafted and has been a kind of being introduced in public policy since 2017, and through the lobby of the Israeli lobby, and to push for the specific definition to be incorporated into policy. And why policy and not law? Because, of course, this policy is unconstitutional, and they know it. So therefore, they pass a public policy that is non-binding, that is a recommendation, that is not really a recommendation, as we will see, and cannot be really challenged by the courts directly, because it's not a law, it's a public policy. So they're very smart in this way, sneaking it into the regulations. So first of all, it basically claims that anti-Semitism is equal to the hostility towards Israel. And this phrase is used throughout the document that was approved. And basically, the idea of the resolution is that they want to fight anti-Semitism in the classroom, in the universities and schools. And basically, they say that anti-Semitism and the hostility towards Israel, which is, of course, very broad. Hostility could be criticism from various degrees. Has no place in schools and universities. And this is the aim of the resolution. So they build a whole apparatus in a way to allow for the regulation of speech and of action. So one of and they are explicit here in part of the resolution that basically they are adopting the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, which basically equates the anti-Semitism with hostility towards Israel. And there's three things that I want to highlight of this resolution. First is the push for surveillance and repression in campuses, in schools and universities. So basically, one of the aims of the resolution is to have a closer connection between the universities and the security authorities of the German state. Here, this is a reminiscence of, the 1930s in a way, and all the dictatorial states. I am from Chile, so I am used also to the Pinochet dictatorship we had back in the 80s, and in which there is a close relation and a kind of a data collection and constant monitoring and reporting of whereabouts and activities to the police, basically to the security apparatuses. So then the universities and schools become basically the surveillance arm of the state, and basically the resolution wants this to be expanded in terms of intensity and regularity. This is very troublesome, since all the emails, for example, of the university that you have are all being monitored. They could erase communication. They could flag communication. They could, and you could get, raided in your own home because of the communications that the university can collect in a manner that is surreptitious. And this is kind of a very dangerous power that is given to the universities to police their own students and faculty. And then also very troublesome is this point 13 here, in which basically they, even if this anti-Semitism resolution is not law and therefore cannot be enforced criminally, the government wants the universities to call in the police in order to allow for Jewish students, staff, and lecturers to feel safe. Again, the idea of perception and the weaponization of, unsafety could be used not only to discipline people inside the campus by people within the university, but also bring the police, and that means that you would get the law involved. Then you have other two very troublesome aspects. So one is basically the institutionalization of anti-Semitism research, okay? And this has many components. I just want to highlight two. Basically, one is that there needs to be, stemming from this new anti-Semitism definition, there's going to be a new curriculum that is going to be imposed in schools. And also is going to be guidelines for research and teaching in general based on this definition, this false definition of anti-Semitism that equates this with anti-Israel approaches. So therefore, there's going to be a hegemonic discourse in the research about Israel and about anti-Semitism that is going to not only be one kind of branch of research, but is going to permeate the whole research endeavor of universities, because there's going to be some guidelines that none of the academics can really pass. And then there's going to be, they say, like a virtuous circle between this research and what is taught in the classrooms, in schools and universities. So the idea is that this research is produced with these new guidelines and this new definition of anti-Semitism, and then this new research is being integrated into the classroom again through lectures and also through mandatory trainings. The idea is that everyone should be trained in this new idea of anti-Semitism, and we should basically behave accordingly. So this is a way of not only shutting out and basically eliminating discourse about Palestine and against Israel, but also creating a hegemonic discourse that could be imposed as a way of indoctrinating the population. This is very, very troublesome. However, what I find most, because that we can fight in a way, there is a way of not adopting that if one doesn't want to. However, the issue of funding is the worst one, I would say, because what is happening now is that the state that gives funding to universities and to scholars, individual scholars, through grants, they are going to impose this new framework, and anybody or any university that does not comply with the new anti-Semitism regulations and have, for example, speakers like me invited, they could get eliminated from the pool of funding, and that basically would strangle the research environment and create a censorship and a way of, researching only what is allowed, that is basically against critical thinking. This same idea of not going, legally against people that are criticizing Israel, but actually defunding them in a passive way, it also has been incorporated into some laws, bills in the United States. And now there is the new definition of the Holocaust Remembrance Alliance in the Senate in the United States. And after the triumph of Donald Trump, it is more likely that that law is going to pass. And therefore, all of this that we're seeing in Germany, which is non-binding, and universities might or might not be able to comply with it, in the US is probably going to be law. And finally, they explicitly, this resolution wants to prohibit and repress the boycotts, divestment, and sanctions movement. Basically, they argue that all institutions have the duty to prevent activities that spread this, and they call it Israel-related anti-Semitism. This is a new kind of compound concept in which it is not only anti-Semitism, but it's Israel-inspired or Israel-related, right? So now we have anything that has to do with Israel could be conceived as anti-Semitism, and therefore it could be opposed. And of course, he said there is this this movement basically demonizes the state of Israel. And that should not have a place in universities. And they basically say we're going to give funding to for excellence, but basically this kind of movements and this kind of research has no place in the German educational and scientific institutions, right? So they equate the BDS with Israel's related anti-Semitism. And I said, basically, there's a resolution and not a law, because a law would be unconstitutional. As we saw in 2022, there was a resolution by the Federal Administrative Court and the Administrative Court of Appeals in a case by the city of Munich, which in 2018 tried to prevent one of its residents to organize a BDS event. And this, of course, was piggybacking in the 2017 resolution by the Bundestag to basically outlaw or prohibit BDS. Okay, so basically, Munich was one of the first cities to try to implement what the Bundestag was suggesting in a way. And the federal courts immediately said that this was inadmissible under the basic law, therefore unconstitutional, and that this policy violates the fundamental right to freedom of expression. And one would think that after this decision, the Bundestag would understand that what they're doing is unconstitutional. However, they keep doing it, and they are trying to push it not through law again, but through continuous policy. And because it is policy, cannot be really contested by the courts until there is a case. So bringing cases to the judiciary, to the courts, is very important to be able to fight back against the policies that try to strangle freedom of expression in universities and schools. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit how this basically, all this resolution and how and all the what has been incorporated into the resolution is being used in the cancellation of this lecture. And of course, this is not about me, it's just an example of what can be done, because this is a pretty outrageous case in a sense that it's one of the first cases in which social media posts are used as a justification in a way to cancel lectures. Other people have been canceled because they have signed letters in favor of BDS, but never in terms of social media posts. Okay, so basically, the lectures canceled my presentation because they argue that I continuously spread anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli content in addition to criticism of Israel. And this is, of course, from a non-German perspective, this is, of course, kind of ridiculous in the sense that you cannot really equate anti-Semitism with anti-Israeli content. You cannot really sanction someone because they have been criticizing a state, right? You're not doing any hatred or discriminatory speech. You're talking about an entity, a political entity, which is a state, which are bound by international law. And when a state is not bound by international law and they are a rogue state, as Israel is today, it is necessary and legitimate to criticize it, to oppose it. And in addition, the post says that I have accusations of apartheid and genocide, which is something that the UN has passed resolutions. The ICJ has passed, as it says, there's plausible genocide being committed. Several experts of genocide and the Holocaust have been, from the very beginning, raising the alarm and saying this is genocide. And not because a resolution has not been passed or a decision has not been made and the International Court of Justice yet means that this is not genocide. And many of the experts, especially Francesca Albanese, which is the special rapporteur for the Palestine for the UN, has been very vocal on this. She is an expert on human rights and genocide, and basically has been calling out the UK government, the German government, the Canadian government, because this time they have not really been complying with international law, which basically forces the states to prevent genocide and to do all that what it needs to do in order to prevent the state that is committing genocide from committing it. So therefore, being in favor or criticizing Israel or prohibiting the criticism of Israel is basically going against international law in a way. So then this is, and what of to the two posts that they singled out as basically being anti-Semitic, which is really, I don't know, there's not really any proof of anything, not even ambiguity of it. So there are two posts. One is the first one that I put on October 7th. And of course, when you are an activist for Palestine and you have been, in the know for a long time, as the majority of people are, basically outside of the Western world, we know what is happening for so many years. We have been waiting for the moment of emancipation. We have been waiting for a moment of crisis in which really the status quo can be changed. Because even if the moments of liberation are historically speaking, violent. There's no moment of emancipation. There's no revolution, no movement in which violence is not committed. And of course, I don't endorse violence. However, this is a historical fact, right? Nobody's going to emancipate you or let you be free without a struggle. So we need to be prepared for the struggle. So therefore, activists pro-Palestine have always been very keen into understanding the forces on the ground and knowing, trying to know the path of the freedom fighters in a way. And part of the issue with this first post is that I talk about Palestinian revolutionaries, and many people say, well, you cannot say that the people that were breaking the fences that day are revolutionaries or are freedom fighters. They are terrorists. And again, we know that terrorism is a word that is used to weaponize. It's a word that is used to basically hurt other people and to treat our enemies in a way. So it is basically the same person could be a freedom fighter and a terrorist depending on what is the point of view, right? So this is not a glorification of any organization in particular. It's just people that have been living under an open-air prison, under apartheid, and under oppression, need to be liberated. They need to emancipate themselves. And therefore, all of us, all of the people that are on the ground, not us, but the people that are on the ground in Gaza, they're all revolutionaries if they are there to emancipate themselves. Not only the people that bear arms, basically everybody is basically a revolutionary in the moment in which the walls are breached, okay? And in that moment, of course, is the moment of exception. It's a moment that you cannot really control things, and things happen. There violence that we saw. There were murders, and of course that is something that it cannot be condoned. It is something terrible on both sides. It's never justified to kill civilians, but it happens in all movements. So my post was in a way a way of wishing the people that were doing that liberation to be cautious in a way, to seek emancipation and not revenge. And many of the actions that happened that day were pure revenge. And, this is a fact too. And then, of course, the revolutionaries are struggle against apartheid. I don't even name Israel at any point. However, this is understood. And Israel is here the oppressor. And I was very afraid of the wrath that was going to come, because we already know, because of all the historical attacks, all the attacks before have been brutal. However, we couldn't even imagine how brutal it would be this time. Then the second post they highlight is a post on April, which is many months after there was this case of a valedictorian on University of South Carolina, who basically, a valedictorian is the person that got the best grades in whole the generation. And the valedictorian, is the one who has the privilege to deliver the speech at the commencement ceremony. And this is a very important event. And this valedictorian, Asna Tabassum, she was arguing basically that given her studies on human rights, on international law, on conflicts, she studied that at the university, and she learned basically that in Israel there is an apartheid state, and that basically terrorizes Arab citizens, and therefore on those grounds, that Israel should not exist as an apartheid state. It's not that Israel shouldn't exist as a state. This is another question, but it shouldn't exist on the grounds that is a state that practices segregation. It needs to be refounded, if you will, right? So these are legitimate grounds. And because in the United States, freedom of speech is the most important of all rights, there is no way that a university can really cancel such a speech based on political views. It's called viewpoint discrimination. And this is something that is unconstitutional and would have put the university in a lot of trouble in a way. So therefore, what happened is that many of the Zionist organizations started saying that there was going to be violence and that basically everything should be canceled. And her speech at the end of the day was canceled because of security reasons, not because of political reasons. So basically, this post was in support of Asna and her statements that even though we can disagree on if Israel is an apartheid state should exist or if Israel should exist as a state that is practices apartheid, you have to respect an opinion that is based on international law, and you cannot cancel a person because you're just saying something about this delicate issue. So therefore, this is the two evidence or proof of anti-Semitic behavior on my part, which is frankly ridiculous. And that is what it makes it a very strong case in a way. So I am trying to fight this at a more broader level. Because this kind of if I'm being canceled, anybody can be canceled in a way because they can go into your media posts and single out whatever thing and just say that they're preventing anti-Semitism. And because they don't know what you're going to say when they invite you, they can speculate. Then they will not invite you because they need to censor themselves. Because if not, they will get defunded. And this is why it is so crucial that we fight this together anyway. And you are in the front lines. I'm not even in Germany, but we need to, as a community of scholars, we need to fight this. Okay, this is the first part of this kind of more expository presentation on freedom of speech. And we can have questions afterwards, but I just wanted to lay out the ground so we're all on the same page and we understand what can come after these resolutions. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about the presentation that I had, which is connected to, of course, all this anti-Semitism resolution and the war. So basically, the original presentation was a little bit more academic, but it was going to be half of it a history of political thought and half an analysis of contemporary politics. So basically, part of my studies, I am a scholar of oligarchic democracy and plebeian politics, the politics from the common people, from below. So for me, looking at representative democracies worldwide, we see that democracies are not really the regime of the people, the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but actually a regime that is managed by a powerful elite that we select through our votes. However, this elite doesn't govern for the common good or for the good of the majority, but for the good of the few. Okay, so even if we keep electing representatives, the outcome of that representation doesn't change in a way. And we have seen it, especially with climate change, in which the majority of the population is in favor of, cutting emissions and all these other things that would hurt companies, and is not being done because basically representatives are bought in one way or another by special interest. Okay. So I define oligarchic democracy as a regime in which the few are elected via popular vote, but everything from law to policies to the adjudication of the courts systematically favors the rich and powerful at the detriment of the common people. This is basically a fact in the majority, like great majority of countries. Only the Nordic countries are kind of an exception, but not really anymore. They are becoming more and more neoliberal, but the majority of countries in the world are very oligarchic. And what happens is that the state itself, the apparatus, which produces the public policy and enforces it, becomes an extractivist oligarchic state. Basically, it extracts from the people and it extracts from nature and basically legalizes this corruption. For example, the laws of lobbyism. So to be a lobbyist in the beginning of the 20th century was, of course, illegal. This is special influences, undue influences on representatives. So if you have the money to hire a lawyer, a lobbyist, then you will have a special access to your representative. That is, of course, against equal political rights and therefore corrupt. The same as campaign finance. In the beginning of the 20th century, it was illegal to give money to representatives because, of course, nothing is free. And today, all money comes from strings attached. However, it became so normal to give money to representatives, and the cast of lobbyists became so large and institutionalized that in the 80s, all these laws started being passed, legalizing this former forms of corruption. So we, as a kind of a 21st century societies, have already legalized forms of corruption, and we basically understand them as almost natural. However, these forms of corruption have allowed for the exploitation of the people through taxes, and we were going to see through war, but also nature, the plundering of nature. And we have, for example, nations in which, and states that are very equal, for example, like Norway or Canada and Germany too, which basically are not as oligarchic as places as the United States or places in Latin America, the most unequal region in the world, but they exploit abroad. So basically what happens, for example, in my own country, Chile, the majority of the GDP is based on mining and the extraction of resources from the earth. And 70% of those mines are owned by Canadian and Australian companies. So therefore, those states who are green inside have been polluting and basically extracting in other countries. The same happened with Norway, who are the first producers of salmon, for example. But they go to Chile and they contaminate the waters, they pollute the waters where there's salmon industry, but they have all this stringent green legislation within Norway. So there is a dichotomy here of a oligarchic democracy, one that is not that is practiced maybe inside a democracy, but basically exploits the margins. And in this understanding, I have created a typology of corruption. We always deal with individual corruption, the bad apples approach. If we just basically plug the bad apples from office and we take, for example, we get Netanyahu out of office, then, all the conflict will be solved in a way. And of course, this is not true. It's not only about individuals, but it's also an institutional corruption. They are branches of government that basically are corrupt, and they operate not for the good that they were created for, but for the special interest. They are distortion of these institutional frameworks. However, it is not only institutions, but also the system as a whole. The whole democracy is basically being rotting from within in a way. And therefore, when we talk about the rule of law does not bring equality and peace and liberty in a way. The rule of law today, because of systemic corruption, it basically benefits the powerful few disproportionately. And we see it with immigration, right? And with the people that are more vulnerable. Those people are not really served by the law, but suffer the law. This is what happens. And this is what I call systemic corruption. So systemic corruption deals with the structure of society. Is independent from legality, is intrinsically related to socioeconomic inequality. So the more inequality there is, the more separated the people from the representatives, and therefore the more corruption there is. And because it's little by little, it's very difficult for us to actually measure it. Today, the indexes of corruption are based on perception. The same as, anti-Semitism is also a perception. Corruption is also a perception. So it depends on the culture and the system and society in which we live in. So something that is basically corrupt in one country is just legal or normal in another. One thing that is anti-Semitic in one country is not in the other. So therefore, we have relativized this idea of corruption, the same as we're relativizing the definition of anti-Semitism. And there is this connection, and it always has been historically, the connection between war, debt, luxury and overconsumption, and systemic corruption, which is the corruption of democracy. So this is what has been called the financial military complex, and it has been operating since the 1500s, at least in modernity. Machiavelli famously in Florence saw that even if Florence was a republic in which the people govern, and actually they had their own institution to govern, the republic, at the end, every time that they had war, they had to get in debt with the elite in order to defend themselves. They needed to buy mercenary armies, to fund an army in order to defend themselves. So the elites were always constantly steering war around. So the republic would have to get into debt, public debt, with the banks, basically. And the banks were actually calling the shots. So the only way to get rid of the grip of oligarchy on the government was to be independent and not rely on that money and not therefore go to war. And if we talk about Israel's illegal war, and here we're going to be very clear, this is an illegal war. There's a lot of talk about Israel having the right to defend herself. I don't know why it is gendered, but basically Israel, of course, as every state, has a right to protect its borders. This is the right that they have. Every state is allowed, basically, to defend the borders and to preemptively preemptively attack another country, basically, that is trying to invade the state, right? So in a way, it is very specific, very contingent, and doesn't allow any state to go and bomb other states. This is not allowed. This is not a right. And therefore, the war that Israel is waging against Palestinian territories and against Lebanon and against other, bordering territories is completely illegal. The UN has been very clear, and there's no legal basis for justifying this war. Okay, it's not a war, really, it's an attack. A unit has already been destroyed. So when we talk about the war as being for profit, and this is also something that we forget, this is not only a war of settlement and conquest, we can talk about this also, but it's also about making money. The US gives $3.8 billion a year in military assistance to Israel. This is, forever, since, the 90s. So they're giving money every year. 3.8 is at the last 5 years that they have increased it. This is a lot of money for weapons, for stocking weapons. And of course, they use this money not only for weapons, but for welfare state, which the United States doesn't even have. So in Israel, you have universal health care, while in the US, 1 million people a year go bankrupt because of medical bills. So this is kind of the tension there, in which taxpayer money from the United States go to fund welfare state in another country, which is completely insane in a way. Since October 7th, the US has given an extra, say, $6.5 billion. This is an insane amount of money. So basically, they're really funding the war and making a profit out of it, as I'm going to see. So basically, Israel has dropped more than 10,000 highly destructive 2,000-pound bombs and thousands of Hellfire missiles and thousands of other kind of weaponry has been used. And they have used so many bombs, and the US has shipped so many bombs to Israel that the military in the US has raised the alarm that the stockpile of weapons in the United States is running low, and therefore that they should basically kind of not send so many weapons and bombs, because the US is going to run out of stock. Okay. And of course, this happens that because the same as single-use plastics, they are single-use. Bombs are used one time. That's it. So every time that you use a bomb, you need to replace it. So this is great for arm dealers, in which everything is, discardable and they need to be replaced. So the U.S. arm dealers made a record profit in 2024. So since October 7th, they have earned billions and billions of dollars. Just to give you an example, Lockheed Martin, which creates this, which builds the planes that have been dropping the bombs, had a 54.86 return. For you to understand the insane amount of return that this means, if you have a very, very good investment, you would have an 8 or 10%. You get maybe a 2% interest in your savings in your bank. So getting almost 55% return, this is huge. And for reference, this outperformed the other companies in the SP 500 in Wall Street by 18%. So already kind of, it's not that every company is making so much money, but they really kind of went off. Then RTX, which are the ones, the company making the bunker buster bombs, the return was 82%. This is really beyond it, 46% outperforming the SP 500. So this is basically people in the arms dealers companies are with the champagne open and basically pushing for more returns, because if these all bombs are single use, you need to replenish them. So they're only buying more, that they have stocks already in production for 1 or 2 more years. So this is like the ongoing war is really the profit for the arms dealers. And this is something that we need to take into account when we think about war and debt, and also the destruction of nature. And with this, I will end. The other aspect of the Israeli war against Palestinian territories is the destruction of nature. Israel has created more than 60 million tons of CO2 emissions, which is equivalent to the emissions of 135 countries a year. This is beyond, and this doesn't even take into account the destruction and the rubble that needs to be cleaned, and all the CO2 that is going to be emitted just to kind of fix things and clean things after the destruction has been created. So many people do not talk really about it, and even the Green Party, voting in favor of this anti-Semitism resolution, really has not been vocal at all about what the destruction that this means. In the moment that we are waging this war in a way against international law, basically, this is impunity through and through. This is not only destroying the Palestinian territories, it's not only destroying nature, but it's also destroying the structure of law that was created after 1945 to prevent the use of violence against populations like it happened during the Holocaust. So all that apparatus, all those institutions have been trying basically to stop Israel from committing genocide and from basically eliminating the settlements in the West Bank. However, all these institutions have been powerless at the end, because the Security Council in the United Nations, so the structure was created with veto powers, and the US has veto power. So there's no way that any action can be, any military action, any boots on the ground to actually help stop these attacks can be done if the US is blocking it. And of course, we saw that the US is really profiting from it. Germany is also profiting a lot. Germany gives around 30% of the weapons to Israel. So the US and Germany are the biggest offenders in this genocidal attacks by Israel. Thank you.